always liked the story of the whisper test. You may have read it. It's from Mary Ann Bird. In it, she writes, I grew up knowing I was different and I hated it. I was born with a cleft palate. And when I started school, my classmates made it clear to me how I looked to others. A little girl with a misshapen lip, crooked nose, lopsided teeth, and garbled speech. When schoolmates asked, what happened to your lip? I'd tell them that I had fallen and cut it on a piece of glass. Somehow, it seemed more acceptable to have suffered an accident than to have been born different. I was convinced that no one outside of my family could love me. There was, however, a teacher in the second grade who we all adored, Ms. Leonard. She was short, round, happy, a sparkling lady. Annually, we had a hearing test. Ms. Leonard gave the test to everyone in the class, and finally, it was my turn. I knew from past years that as we stood against the door and covered one ear, the teacher sitting at the desk would whisper something and we'd have to repeat it back. Things like, the sky is blue, or do you have new shoes? I waited there for those words, those 7 words that changed my life. Ms. Leonard whispered, she said in a whisper, I wish you were my little girl. She loved me, and she said it out loud with those 7 words, and it changed my life. It changed my sense of who I am. Transformed by words. What we say matters. We have the ability to create change even with our words. And life is change. And unlike all other creatures, we human beings have the ability to change things and create something new that never existed before. Whether it's a poem or a piece of music or an iPad or a building, a community that respects all different kinds of beliefs, that respects different people's questions and honors their humanity. We are change agents by our very nature. Our words have the power to shape and transform reality, and to think how careless we can be sometimes with our words. How many people have had a teacher, a preacher, a parent, a partner tell them, well, you're not a good artist, or you're not a good dancer, or you're not a good writer, or something else that with a few words cast a spell over you, set you in a trance so that you started to believe that that was reality? Our words matter, and they can transform a person's life. Our lives have been transformed by words from other people. Now, as transformative and powerful as our words can be, saying I love you is not going to stop bombs from coming down on Gaza or to Ukraine. It's not going to get the hostages back to Israel. Saying I love you is not going to end global warming. It's not going to ensure that America remains a democracy. That's transformation on a whole nother level. And I want to talk about that today, about what we can do to be agents of change in all different ways, big and small. It comes from focusing on what we can actually influence with our lives. So in the story that I opened with, the whisper test, the teacher, Ms. Leonard, she wasn't a doctor. She could not help this little 7-year-old girl, Marianne, fix her lip. Miss Leonard had no power to do anything to protect little Marianne from the people that she would meet throughout her life who might tease her or reject her in some way because of how she looked. But she did have influence in one area. She could let her know that she was loved and that she was lovable. She worked within her sphere of influence in the things that she could actually impact. And by doing so, she changed the life of that girl. Heck, she might have changed your life now that you've heard the story. When we work within our sphere of influence, our influence grows. And that's why people who really make change in the world focus on what can I do? Now, if you're like me, you have lots of concerns. The environment, homelessness, domestic abuse, hunger, war, poverty, oppression of all kinds, violence, gun violence, corruption. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But most of these things are way outside mine and probably your sphere of influence. But it's interesting how much time we can end up spending talking about and thinking about and worrying about things that we can't do anything about. I've learned that the people who make a difference are people who focus on their own sphere of influence and go from there. And then their influence grows. So you might remember, I don't know, I'm looking out at the age of everybody here. You might remember the British rock band from the 1980s, the Boomtown Rats. Anybody remember the Boom? Oh yeah, okay. We got some Gen Xers here in the crowd. But do you remember what their one-hit song was? Anybody? Can you call it out? One hit, it was a one-hit wonder. I don't like Mondays. Remember that? I hope it doesn't get stuck in your head now. But that, I don't like Mondays, which is, of course, something that is very a common thing that many people feel, but it's not exactly a shining contribution to Western civilization to have a song, I don't like Mondays. But do you remember who the lead singer was in the Boomtown Rats? Bob Geldof. He's more well known for having organized the Live Aid concerts that happened in the late 80s that saved millions of people from starvation in Africa, particularly women and children. Now think about this. Bob Geldof, who you don't even know or remember his name, Bob Geldof was the leader of a band who had one hit years earlier. He and his bandmates were playing concerts in pubs throughout England and Ireland to make some money. And one day he read that mass starvation was happening in Africa, and he decided that he wanted to try to do something about it. He knew a pub owner, and he had a band, and so he said, hey, we could play a benefit concert, raise some money, and help some people. He asked the pub owner, he said, great. And then about 6 weeks before the concert was going to happen, Geldof started putting flyers up around London about the benefit concert. For the young people in the congregation, before we had the internet, we had to, if you wanted to advertise something, you had to copy pieces of paper and hang them up on telephone poles and billboards around in like coffee shops and stuff like that, libraries. Anyway, a few days later, after Geldof started putting these flyers around, he got a call from a man named Mick Jagger, who said, I saw your flyers around town and I was wondering if it'd be okay if my band joined your band for the concert. Well, in the 1980s, the Rolling Stones were like at their height of their popularity. And of course, Geldof said, sure, we'd love to play with the Rolling Stones. And so now the concert had to be moved from this little pub into a stadium in London. And when word got out that the Rolling Stones were playing a benefit concert to try to end hunger and starvation in Africa, well, then Elton John wanted to take part, and Eric Clapton and Sting and Freddie Mercury, and then pretty soon the American rock stars, so Tom Petty and everybody else, they wanted to be a part. And so it went from one stadium in London to two stadiums, one in London, one in New York, and then the television networks decided, let's simulcast this thing all over the world. Anybody remember the Live Aid concerts? Any of us old enough? All right. There's more of us who remember that. That was pretty special. It was pretty amazing. Pretty much every major rock band and personality got involved, and millions and millions of people watched, contributed, and millions of lives were saved because of that. And many people were given an opportunity to make a difference and be a part of doing it. But it didn't start with Geldof planning to change the world like this. It started because he had a concern, and he said, what can I do? Well, got the band, I know the pub owner, and he worked within his little circle of influence, and by doing that, his influence grew. Another great example that Stephen Covey likes to tell in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is Mahatma Gandhi. He was this guy, it's like short in stature. He walked around in like hand-spun linen robe-like clothes with sandals and bare feet and a little cane, this bald guy. And he was determined to do something to end colonialization and oppression of his people by the great British Empire. Now, he didn't start out by flying to London to talk to the king. He didn't even fly to New Delhi to try to talk to the legislators there. Quite frankly, they didn't give a darn what he had to say. Where he had influence was not on politicians, was not on politics, both either in Europe or in India. So what did he do? He started by meeting with the people in the rice fields of India. Those are the people who he had influence over. He built grassroots support, and his influence grew. This tiny little man went on to defeat one of the greatest colonial powers that the world has ever seen, not with weapons, but with influence. People who are effective, those who change the world, those who transform the course of history in big or very small ways, are the ones who put their time and they put their energy into things where they actually have some influence. So what does this have to do with us? Well, about 20 years ago, All Souls decided to give away 100% of our Sunday offering plate each week to organizations outside of our community. We had no idea how impactful this decision would be. What we knew was that we had a congregation full of people each week, and there were a lot of causes in our city that we knew were underfunded and needed support. Homelessness, hunger, abuse, education, addiction, the environment, more and more and more. Instead of just decrying the problem from up here, from there, from our homes, we decided to use the little influence we have to impact the little bit that we could. Do you realize before we did this, in a year, we would collect about $18,000 in the collection plate every Sunday. And there were some people who were like, we can't start giving it away. What do we do? 18,000, we're going to have to, that's going to change significantly our budget. It actually took us a year to decide, come on, we should just do this. And when we did, the first year we started giving away the plate, we raised over $130,000 and we gave it all away. I know, it was amazing. It was amazing. The tsunami, in fact, do you remember the tsunami that happened over in Asia? I think that Sunday morning we raised like $45,000. And then I think there was a hurricane or something else. We raised like $16,000 in one Sunday. It was just amazing to see the response. And the thing was that people started to support the church even more too. So we made up that $18,000 and then some. Because generosity begets generosity. People, when we start giving and realizing, wow, I'm having an impact, people decide to give more. When you use your influence grows. But that's not all. What we did not expect was that other Unitarian Universalist churches around the country would hear about it. In fact, there was an article eventually that was written in the National Unitarian Universalist magazine that goes out to people over 1,000 congregations around the country. Before long, there were hundreds of Unitarian Universalist churches all over the country giving away their offering each week. Now, we did not set out to impact homelessness, hunger, abuse, education, and more in Miami, Memphis, Minneapolis, or Boston, Buffalo, and Biloxi, or Tempe, Tuscaloosa, or Tennessee. But that's what happened. All of a sudden, what we were doing here was not just helping some homeless here, but we're helping people all across the country because of what we decided to do. Because we decided to work within our sphere of influence, that influence grew, and the rest is history. Successful and effective people who feel empowered in their lives, are happy that they've got something to do and they're making a difference and they're doing what they can with their lives. They don't just feel a victim of society and a victim of life, but they actually feel like, hey, I'm making a difference in my way, in the ways I can, I'm doing what I can do, are people who work within their sphere of influence. Don't spend all their time thinking about and worrying about things that they can't do anything about. So most of us would say there's no hell in the afterlife. Probably all of us. But we know that there are real hells right here in this life that many people are dealing with: hunger, war, poverty, prejudice. The great social reformer Dorothy Day said this: people say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. Each one of our thoughts, our words, and our deeds is like that. No one has the right to sit down and feel hopeless. And Margaret Mead said it this way: never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. To the new members of All Souls who are being welcomed into this community today, this is the tradition of which you are becoming a part. And we want to welcome you into this family. Now, I realize that listening to this, you may have spent a lot of time in your life with the spell somehow cast over you that you don't have much that you can do to make a difference. You might have been living under the trance that I'm just an individual, these things are too big for me. Well, if that's the case, then I hope this message is our little whisper test. And that, in a way, I've just whispered in your ear, not, I wish you were my little girl, But, oh, girl, welcome to the family. It's great to have you here. Welcome, everybody. I love you.
In our joy we sing, returning home to our glory hill.